So, Scarlet by Doja Cat. Let's get into it. Scarlet marks Doja's first studio album and is her most personal and artistic one yet. According to Doja, the album is intentionally meant to be, and I quote, her playing a more vivid and edgy persona, hence the title Scarlet, a bright red, which takes us to the opening track, Paint the Town Red. I find this track to be a bit provocative, blatant. It has a great and exciting beat. It has a really good flow, and her cadence on the track is sublime, especially on that hook. The track samples the 1970s classic Walk On by Dionne Warwick, which is a relatively good way to sample the track, and I think it works pretty well. Overall, this track serves as a really good opener. It's also a single, which makes sense because it's actually really good. It's catchy enough, but it also has enough bars, and her cadence on the track really sells. Her performance on the track is actually pretty good, and personally, I'll give this track as an opener and as a single 9 out of 10. Which takes us into track 2, which is entitled Demons. This was also another pre release single. Again, it's another provocative track. However, on this track, she more embraces the persona of a demonic side, and she kind of tried to promote or accentuates the gimmick. It's not really up to my taste. It has hints of drill on the percussive side of the beat. It has a heavy 808, which is mixed with a kick drum, which is just way too muchy and does not work at all for me. It sounds very cheap, and I feel like this could have been a lot better produced and a lot better delivered. I get what she was going for, but the bars were kind of undercooked at times. But she does express a lot of personality on the verses nonetheless. But I just cannot get past that heavy 808 kick drum beat. I just found it distasteful, if I'm being honest. Easily, it's the weakest single from this, one of the weakest tracks, also. Which takes us to track 3. It's entitled Wet Vagina. This track has a lots of energy. Again, she feeds into the idea of being an outcast or the villain of her own story, which on this track, compared to the previous track, it actually works here. Again, she uses a lot of metaphors, especially on the hook where she compares her drip, her fashion, her sense, her style to that of a wet vagina, which I think actually works here and is pretty much on brand for Doja Cat. So yes, very strong. Better delivery compared to Demons, and I just think this track is overall better written, better produced, and better song. This also features another 808 kick drum pattern beat, but it actually works on this track as compared to the previous track where it just felt way too heavy. I think it's a lot of little lighter on here, which makes the track a lot more enjoyable because it doesn't make my ears bleed. So yeah, a lot better. I'll give this around an 8 out of 10 as a track. Moving on to track 4, we have F the Girls. The vocal and tonal shifts in this track is actually really sublime. I think it's one of Doja's strongest characteristics. So she actually uses it and plays into her strengths on this track. She uses the hook almost as if it were a sample in areas, almost having like a call and response. The flow is actually really strong, and I feel the guitar playing off of that 808 adds a fairly decent balance to the track, and nothing is drowned out. Also, it's actually interesting to point out that sections of the track actually reminds me of Nicki Minaj, which should come as no surprise that I feel like she's a big influence on Doja Cat. That's never been a secret, so I rate this track pretty good. Moving on to Ouchies. Thus far, this would have been the fifth track in the album, and I feel like of the five, this would have been the most innovative production wise, in my opinion. Bars were pretty strong. She had a lot of pop culture references to movies, shows, songs, and even other artists. With my favorite line being, "I'm the goat, no Eilish." You get it? The play on Billy Goat, but Billie Eilish was my favorite bar. Some might find that cheesy, but I like it. The ominous piano loop playing off of that obscure singular note I don't remember what the note was. I can't get into all of that right now, but it was pretty ominous, and I think it created a really good aesthetic towards the track, and it works well. We get into 97, and this is the first track which features an organic sounding piano, and it's paired with this sparse yet powerful percussive section. It has a type of whisper flow going on this track, and it works well, especially paired with that call and response section. It's kind of like a 90s old school rap cut, so it works. The old school flow balances well, and I think she actually delivers well on this track. Her performance was actually relatively strong. She also addresses her tweets and her recent appearance, and I kind of find this track like it was a counterpart to the opening track, Paint the Town Red. So thus far in the album, we've had two tracks which kind of are similar, but they just oppose the angle which they take the track from. So yeah, but I also find 97 equally as strong as Paint the Town Red compared to the earlier track, which was similar to Demons. We then get into track 7, which is titled Gun. She uses a metaphor. I won't repeat what the metaphor was, but it's a metaphor that I've heard a Lil Wayne actually use, and it was stronger then. So it's not new, but she does decent at it. This is also not one of my favorite tracks on the album. It's not bad by any regards. I find it to be a more by the books track. Definitely an album cut. Definitely deserves to be here, but will I be replaying this? Probably not. But I think one of the biggest flaws of the track is it reminds me of something that could have been on either one of her two previous bodies of work that I've actually listened to. So, yeah, nothing innovative here. However, I do appreciate that ominous piano loop which is being played, especially when she harmonizes the melodies. So, that was the best portion of the track, in my opinion. So, yeah, one of the weaker cuts, but not bad, just forgettable. Moving on to track 8, we have Go Off. This is kind of like a typical female empowerment anthem. I have no issues with this track. I'm just not the demographic that it's aimed at, so and naturally, I don't really find the track to be that great. So, yeah, like for what it's worth, for the statement it tries to make, I have no issue with it. I think women will appreciate this one a lot more. It just doesn't stand out enough for me to to get replay value. Definitely not a bad track though. So we then get into Agora Hills, and this was a single that was released on the day of the album. I like the trope that she uses, where she just opposes a lot throughout this track. There are a lot of contrasts and ironies at play when you take this track into consideration, especially when you get into lyrics. And at first sight, it seems like it's a sweet song about wanting to show off your partner, but then, especially when you watch a video, it's like a lot of 90s, 2000s lovey-dovey teenage high school couple visuals. Her on the bed, texting, kicking, swinging her feet, stuff like that. And then when you get into the lyrics, you realize how possessive it actually is. And I just feel like I like the contrast of the video being a little more lighthearted compared to the track, which actually takes on some darker tones of being controlling, possessive, and so forth. It's an interesting take by Doja. I really love the spacious chords that are on this track also, and it's really strong use of good background vocals, especially when she harmonizes. So pretty strong from Doja. We then get into track 10, which is entitled Can't Wait. Easily this has to be my favorite hook. It at first When I first heard this track, it totally threw me a curveball because I did not expect her to go this in depth with an R&B sounding vocal approach. So, yeah, that was really unexpected, but in a positive way. I really like the tempo switches throughout this track. A lot of them are subtle, but it works. It really works well, and it keeps the track fresh and interesting. So kudos to you, Doja, on that. The metronome reminded me of something from Steve Lacy, especially with that. What's it called? Like a 8 count. Very reminiscent of Steve Lacy. So that's something of note. And the constantly evolving instrumental really just kept the track interesting, and it's easily one of her strongest vocal performances throughout the project. So we then get down to track 10, which is entitled Often. This has such a pretty groovy bass line. It has neo soul keys. She sings a lot of the track throughout her falsetto and coming down to her mixed voice. She stays somewhat in her upper range throughout most of the track, which works really well. The track kind of reminds me of something I would hear from her. Sorry, kind of like "I Can't Breathe" or "Bloody Waters." That's something like what the bass line reminds me of, or even "Sir." Teach me. Sir sings "Teach Me," right? Yeah, that's what the bass line really reminds me of. Kind of in that neo soul groovy R&B lane. So pretty interesting artistic vision here from Doja. I've never heard her get this in depth in R&B before, like she's done on these two previous tracks. So I like it. I would personally say Often is the best vocal performance on the entire project, and I really enjoyed the outro. I think it could have been a bit longer, but I like the little addition of a little top box, although I wish it was more prevalent throughout the track. But especially towards the end, you could hear it a lot clearer, so I think it works. Really good stuff from Doja here. I may be a little biased when it comes to the R&B cuts because R&B tends to be the genre I lean to more in favoritism, so y'all may not necessarily agree with me, but this is how I be feeling. We then get down to track 12, which is entitled Love Life. This is a beat I could hear Kendrick Lamar rap over. And again, her cadence and tonal shifts reminds me of something Kendrick would do. I know she did say that this album is kind of her tapping into her more masculine side as opposed to being the sexy all pink Doja that we have had on her previous projects. So I get the idea, and I think she pulls it off relatively well. This is one of the more introspective and intimate tracks on the project where she actually disguises the persona, and I actually like it. We then get down to track 13, which is entitled Skull and Bones. It's good. It's good. It's really strong production. The musical choices actually work. It has a strong harmonic section. I love the small hits of pianos being played off of that watery bass line. It's really groovy. It's really strong. I noticed the subtle tempo switches also. This has happened on like 3 tracks, which I think kept the track interesting all the way through. So kudos to you again on that. And I think the first half of each verse was okay, but I really liked when she picked up the flow on the latter stages of the verses with that speedier or more punchline delivery. It actually worked, and it actually made the track a lot better, in my opinion. We then get down to Attention, which was the lead single of this project. There's not much to say about this track. It was the lead single. I always thought the track reminded me of J. Cole the very first time I heard it, which was months ago, to be honest. It blew up on TikTok. It had a viral moment. I think this may have went number one or at least top 10. Track opens with a very peaceful and somber harmonic section before it gets into that beat, which I said reminded me of J. Cole, something J. Cole would definitely rap over. So I really liked it, really enjoyed it. I find this to be a strong single and a strong lead single at that. So I really like it. We then get to the final track, which is entitled, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, it's Balut, kind of like salute, but with a B. I hope this is an English word and not something that's throwing me off. But yeah, basically, this is a 90s beat track. She raps well over it. It sounds good. Is it my favorite track? No. Is it a good track? Definitely. I think Attention could have been the closer. but I like Balut enough for it to be here. So I will say Scarlet by Doja was a pretty decent ride. I feel like the opening of the album was pretty hip hop heavy. Definitely the rap section of the project, which I think she delivered considerably well on. And a lot of the bars and cadences and flows actually surprised me. And I think it was the second strongest portion of the album. Personally, this is to my taste. I think a lot of people would acclaim this to be the best portion of the album. The first three, four songs, minus Demons, I feel like that could have been left off or even better done, which is actually better done with Wet Vagina, in my opinion. So we then get into the more pop crossover section of the album throughout the middle, which is where the album kind of dwindles a little for me. I feel like that was definitely the weakest portion of the album, and I think everyone should agree or would agree with that. Well, most people. If Pop Doja is your favorite, you would have loved that. But I think the album did dwindle there. But then I think it picked up for the better for me, especially in that latter section where she got into this deeper, groovy neo soul R&B vibe, which really showcases her strengths like never before on any other project. Because I don't think she's ever gotten this deep into actually making some traditional or deeper sounding R&B music, and I think she pulled it off pretty well. I do know she gets nominated in R&B categories, so I feel like if she's going to be labeled as another R&B act by these mainstream stream award shows, I feel like she needs to have songs or projects to back it up. And I feel thus far this could have been labeled as alternative R&B certain sections. So definitely the strongest portion of the album, but that's totally opinionated because it's my taste. So yeah, overall I give this album a 9 out of 10. It does have its highlights and its lowlights aren't actually that bad. So I feel like she's delivered on this album. Commercially, this album has not done as well as you would have anticipated it to do, which is questionable because I feel like this may have been one easily better than her last project. So that's an interesting thing to look at. But yeah, probably it's because it's not as poppy as the previous, but that does not take away from the fact that this is a clear artistic vision, which I think she pulls off well. So kudos to you, Doja. You get a 9 out of 10 from me, and I have quite a couple of tracks on repeat. I'd like to know your thoughts, whether you agree with me, which is great if you do, and also fine if you don't. List your favorite tracks down below. Let me know if you agree with my take. Let me know we can have a discussion about this if you do not. But yeah, let me know how much you rate this album, and I'll also link my favorite tracks down below and my least favorite.